Stay tuned to meet two women on a mission. My name is Yvonne Lewis, and you're watching Urban Report. Hello and welcome to Urban Report. My guests today are both from the southern region of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Lori Gray, Regional Administrator, and Vendetta Dennis, Program Manager. Welcome to Urban Report. Lori and Vendetta.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our program, and I don't know if you've had a chance to ever watch it, but this program has testimonies, but also resources. And we wanted to have you from DCFS today to just kind of share with us what's going on in the whole foster care field. Why is foster care important, first of all?
Well, it's so important because there are families that need support and help, and children that need places to live. That's the minimum they need. They need a lot more than that. They need mentors and guides and parents and people to help them recover from things that have happened to them, bad things that have happened. So there's a lot of call for families to come forward and help these young people get their best life.
Yes, yes. What would you say is a kind of a typical profile of a child that comes to you, Vendetta?
Probably a child who has been neglected as a result of substance abuse, where the parent has been unable to properly parent him in the home, which has resulted in him being neglected in terms of maybe food, clothing, shelter, educational needs. That's one type. We also have situations where children may have been abused, also from substance abuse, mental illness, physical abuse. Just about every societal ill, so to speak, touches the lives of the children that we serve.
Mm-hmm. How do you find these children? Because normally I know the children wouldn't come to you. How do you find them?
Everyone, actually. So the state of Illinois has a hotline, 24-hour hotline, and anytime somebody suspects abuse or neglect, they can call the hotline, and that will create a report, and then we do what is called an investigation, and we make a decision at that point in time whether the children are safe to remain with their parents, or if they're not, then we remove them from the home. That's actually not the largest part of what we do. We do services with intact families, try to support families, strengthen them, help them maintain at home with their parents. That's our first goal always. Removal is really less than 5% of the reports we get. So those tend to be the cases that get the most attention.
Okay.
But that 5%, that's a difficult population, and those are children typically who have really suffered pretty serious abuse and neglect, as Vendetta described.
So that hotline, and our program goes around the country, are there others that you know of, other hotlines around the country for different child protective services that people can call in and say, I suspect that? Is it anonymous, or is it?
It is in Illinois.
Okay.
It can be in Illinois. I can't speak for every other state. All states do have a hotline, but you can also notify law enforcement if it's something serious or urgent or something like that. But I'm not sure, I couldn't say nationally, the rules regarding anonymity, but in Illinois you can remain anonymous.
Because I would think that there might be some calls that are just not grounded in reality, and then some that are, so, you know, and then some people don't want it to be known that they are the ones that called and, you know, for retaliation purposes and all that. So I would think that that would be an issue, but I didn't know that that's really just 5%, that the children that are abused are really maybe just 5% of the children that you deal with.
Well, let me clarify that the 5% number, the under 5%, are the children we remove from their parents. There's a much larger number of children that we have involvement with in an effort to keep them at home and to keep them in their home of parent, as it were, and provide them. We try to provide services to the parent and keep them there.
And see, I love that because it's so, no matter how uncomfortable, unless there's abuse going on, no matter how uncomfortable it is, that's still the child's home.
Yes.
So you don't, it would seem to me that it would be so traumatic to remove the child from the home unless there's abuse. If there's abuse, you have to do it, obviously. But if not, it makes so much more sense to strengthen that family. So what kinds of things do you do to strengthen the family unit?
Well, we have what's called intact services, and those services are families that we serve as, we assign a case manager, and we provide, as Vendetta mentioned, substance abuse, well, we refer them out for those services.
Okay.
Substance abuse services, mental health services, we can do parenting, like in-home parenting classes with them. You know, we can help them get on their feet. We actually have some funds available to help a family who maybe is in poverty, doesn't have housing or the ability to pay for food. So there's a lot we can do in-home, and would only remove a child if those things could not, there wasn't enough we could do in that way to keep them safe.
Explain what both of you do for DCFS. What do both of you do? I know you're the regional manager.
I'm the regional administrator. So basically I'm over the operations in the bottom 34 counties of Southern Illinois. So from the Metro East St. Louis area down to the Alexander County Cairo area. So I'm over all the follow-up services. Those are children who have come into foster care. And then all the child protection investigations that are also conducted in Southern Illinois.
What do you do, Vendetta?
I am over the foster home recruitment and retention, and the permanency advocates, the permanency achievement, permanency achievement specialists. The permanency achievement specialists are those workers who work with a family at the beginning of their involvement in the foster care experience, with trying to locate relatives or what we call fictive kin, or any other supportive resource to that family that may be of assistance to that family while their child or children are in care. They also work with children who have been identified what we call step downs. They have been in a residential placement and they are now ready to be in a less restrictive environment, meaning a specialized foster home or a traditional foster home. Or it maybe even step home, even be able to go home to their biological family. So they work with the case managers that have those cases to try to make sure that happens. So they're involved at the front door and also at the back door. Of course, the foster care recruitment and retention is pretty obvious. I work with those individuals that go out and recruit foster homes and then work with the foster homes to try to make sure that we are being supportive of them so that we can retain them.
Right, right. So with the foster home, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, with the foster homes, what kinds of parents do you look for? What kinds of families do you look for to place the children in?
It's interesting. The children that come into foster care are very unique, and so it's hard to kind of summarize the needs of each individual child, because who knows what family is going to work for what child.
Right.
Generally speaking, you have to be 21 to foster, and we require a background check that they clear, no criminal history or no history of abuse and neglect. We have minimum requirements for, a place to live, and that the foster child will have some space, and so there are those minimum things.
Does it have to be a couple? Can it be a single person?
Single person, civil unions. We've had sisters that live together who foster together. We've had single people working, not working. Actually, it's pretty much as long as you're an adult and can handle and can pass a background check, and we believe you can provide care, adequate care. It's certainly an opportunity.
That's great. And so there is some kind of remuneration for this, right? Parents, that the state will pay the parent. How does that run? How does that work?
So basically, children in foster care, we do pay for it's basically their, for their care, their board, and we call it a board rate. Kind of a technical term, but it's a board rate, and basically it's supposed to help with food and clothing and those kinds of things.
Okay, but you can't give me any.
It actually varies depending on the type of home. So, for example, many of our foster parents are relative caregivers, and so they actually receive a lower rate if they're unlicensed. Because a traditional foster parent, which would be somebody, a stranger to a child, let's say, they're considered a traditional foster parent, and so they're licensed by us, and then they receive a higher rate, which is somewhere $475 or $486 a month per child. But a relative, for example, would receive a reduced rate because they're not licensed necessarily.
So if the relative became licensed,
they would receive the higher rate.
They'd receive the higher rate. And how long is the licensing process?
It varies. There are typically 3 to 6 months.
Right. Yeah, that would be about right.
I think that would be a
3
fair.
to 6 months.
So usually, let's kind of walk me through this. Walk our viewers through this. So someone calls your agency and says, little Johnny is being abused by his mom and dad. And so from that call on, walk us through what happens to little Johnny.
So
it would depend on where they called. If they called, they should call the hotline, or they could call the police. And once they call the hotline, there are workers that have been trained to screen these types of calls to try to see if there is not evidence, but if there is a suspected possibility, so to speak, that there has been abuse or neglect. Those workers will ask certain questions of the caller, and as Lori said, their identity remains anonymous. A lot of times, I won't say a lot of times, but sometimes people can figure out who is making the calls, and that has something to do with somewhere like with harassment calls sometimes, that when people think that certain people have called, they will You know, so that's part. So they've been trained on how to try to distinguish between those types of calls.
Right. Is it live or is it Memorex, right? Is it
Right,
real?
right.
Is it real
So-
or is it somebody with some agenda?
Right, exactly. So when they make that determination that it is live, they will assign that particular report to a particular area where that call is coming from, to that office that serves that area, and it is assigned to an investigator. And that investigator has up to 24 hours to initiate that report unless it has been deemed necessary for them to go out prior to that. Could be as quickly as an hour. It just depends on the nature of the allegation.
So if it seems as though the child is in imminent danger,
Yes.
someone goes out within the hour.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. And then, but if it's not like a sexual abuse or something like that, then it might be 24 hours or 48 hours or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of that's based on age of the child, what they're alleging. Just as an example, when we got what we would consider an emergency response, it was a young child in a home that didn't have any heat, and the temperature was, you know, one of those below zero night wind chills, you know, and so something like that can even create an emergency response. So even though that may be an allegation that the house wasn't appropriate, and normally we might take 24 hours to initiate that, in that particular situation, it's an emergency because we have a young child with no heat, and it's a long night when you're cold. So, so it does really just vary, and there's a lot of judgment that plays into that when they make those decisions.
So the person is called, the investigator has been assigned.
Right.
The investigator goes to the home. What kind of responses do you often get when that person, well, first I guess they call to say they're coming?
No.
They just show up?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So then what happens? Wow.
Wow. Well, it varies.
Yeah,
You know. Sometimes I think people aren't surprised. It depends on what the allegation is. But often you're met with anger initially because this is an outsider coming to your home and is telling you that they need to question you about something that you are not doing with your child. So
and that's a very sensitive place.
Oh, yes.
Where a stranger comes to your home and accuses you of doing or not doing something with your child. I mean, I can see how that's a dangerous job. The investigator has a dangerous job because there's going to be, typically, I would think, some resistance, some anger, and lashing out.
And sometimes, depending on the allegation, it may be necessary that they have the local police to accompany them.
Okay.
We don't ever want to put our investigators in harm's way, if at all possible. So if there is even an inkling that things may not go as smoothly as they possibly could, investigators will contact.
Well, and I'll just add that investigators don't call ahead or whatever, but what they can do if it's a family that they have concern about, they can call and talk to law enforcement, you know, and ask questions about, do you know this family? Does this family have a criminal history? Is there anybody in this household that I might, you know, need to be cautious of? And they can also call the person that reported. If that person provided their name and number, they can call that reporter and say, you know, how do you think this family will respond to me coming out? I mean, are they aware that you reported this? So actually, a lot of people tell them. Teachers will say, I'm calling the hotline. So some families do know. So there is they can do some pre-work to avoid some of those situations. But frequently, it's just a cold knock on the door.
Wow. Okay, so we've got little Johnny over in the corner somewhere, and the mom or the dad opens the door. How do they, what does the investigator say? I know it's not everybody says the same thing, but there must be some kind of general thing. What do they say normally to the parent that has opened that door and now they're going to find out that they've done or haven't done something or been accused of something? What does the investigator say?
Well, I think that the first thing is engagement.
Okay.
I mean, we have to go to that door with a, this is who we are, and we just need to ask some questions and get some information, and this call has come into us, and somebody was concerned enough to call about your child. And so, they're going to, most of our investigators are well trained in the art of negotiating their way in the door, I guess you could say. So they have been trained in that way. Not every family is as receptive as some families. It's interesting, a lot of families are, I think maybe, I don't know if it's shock or, somebody's at my door. A lot of families are very, okay, why are you here?
Yeah,
I don't understand this, or they know. Yeah, I know that happened, and here's what happened. And so it's just a varying degree of willingness, but it is really all about engagement on the part of the investigator.
Well, that makes sense to me. So the investigator is kind of going on a fact-finding mission.
Exactly.
Yes.
To determine whether or not the allegations are grounded. If there's no validity to it, they write that up and they're gone. But if there is, what do they do next?
Well, it just depends on what the allegation is. And hopefully we'll ask them if they would like to have services. Because during the course of the investigation, something else may come out of it where the family is in need of some services that will allow them to be able to function maybe better than what they were before we walked into their lives. So they will ask if they would like to have counseling, it could be daycare, what else? Parenting.
Would they agree to do some substance abuse services if that was an identified issue? So we kind of give them some options. Here are some things you could do to strengthen your family. We'd like to help you do that.
Are these group sessions or are these individualized family sessions? In other words, if it's substance abuse, do they go out to a program?
Yes.
Or if it's parenting, do they go out to a parenting seminar?
Yes, however,
what's available.
Right.
You have both kinds of parenting,
right.
I think.
In home and out of home.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to do what we call individualized service plan with families to try to identify their strengths and their opportunities for growth.
Nice.
So, and in doing that, then we can set out a course to help them to be able to navigate through the child welfare system or to get out of the child welfare system.
Right. So what steps should a parent take or a family take if they want a foster child? What should they do? And talk about the need, if you would, for homes to take in these children.
So foster, actually, and nationally, there's a need for foster parents. There's always going to be a need. We'd love to be out of business.
Yeah.
That's just the work we do. But there's always going to be a need for people to be willing to take in young people and help them grow. Part of the national movement as well is moving towards more of looking at it less as fostering children and maybe fostering families. And what can families do to not just, take a child into your home, but then support their birth family and maybe mentor them and do what we call shared parenting, which is where maybe a foster mother is now also in some ways mothering the parent. Because what we know about trauma to families is a lot of these parents they were not necessarily parented either.
That's right.
And so what we're trying to do is give them the same support and hopefully be able to reunite them with their children. And if we can't reunite them with their children, they will still have a relationship with their children that is kept between the foster family, the family that is raising their child. They can still know their birth family. And that's so important because so many of the children in our system are older youth who, you know, they need those commitments, they need those lifelong connections, and that's who they want to know when they're adults, is those birth families.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm reminded of a family of 5 children who were fortunately placed together, which is what we like to do whenever possible, to keep siblings together. And they were in a foster home that allowed the mother to come in and bathe the youngest child every day to try to keep that connectedness and also help the mother to recognize that she was still a part of their life, and that the place where her children were was a safe place, and it really helped particularly the older children to be able to adjust to being without their mom for the period of time that they were. And then they eventually, they went home, and the foster parents provide babysitting for them. For the mother now.
Nice.
Because the reason they came into care was because she was not providing adequate supervision. So she was able to get that support system there.
That's beautiful.
Yes,
That's beautiful because
works.
you kept the family intact.
Yes.
You know, the mother still had contact. That's beautiful. How can people get in touch with you if they want to become foster parents? How do they reach you?
Well, DCFS has a website. So it's dcfs.illinois spelled out .gov, and then we have regionally we have a local person, and so if they call 618-583-2100 and ask for that they're interested in fostering, we will get them to who they need to talk to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, James 1:27 says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and to keep oneself unspotted from the world." While foster children may not be orphans, they need homes, loving care, and compassion from us. We can train them in the way they should go and give them the best gift that we have, Jesus Christ. Well, we've reached the end of another program. Join us next time, because you know what? It just wouldn't be the same without you.